Listen closely, and I will tell you a story. The story of Harthanor and the will-o'-the-wisps. Long ago, in the peaceful lands of Merrie, there lived a young noblewoman named Harthanor. She lived within the castle of Twinlight Nest, a small village resting between ancient inquisitorial ruins and a quiet river. There the water flowed slowly toward the east, along the distant lands of the Shire. From the high windows of the tower, Harthanor could see much of the village below, and the winding roads that disappeared into distant forests. Yet despite this wide view of the world, her own world remained very small. Most of her days passed quietly. Harthanor wandered through the streets of Twinlight Nest without any real destination. She rarely traveled beyond the familiar paths of the village. Since the death of her parents when she was still a child, she had always been protected, perhaps too much. After their passing, it was her grandfather who raised her. They spent many evenings together beside the fire, long, peaceful evenings where the outside world seemed very far away. Her grandfather loved telling stories of forgotten roads, of distant valleys, of lands far beyond the hills. But among all the tales he told, there was one Harthanor never forgot: the story of the will-o'-the-wisps. He said that somewhere east of the Shire, beyond the wild lands and the misty valleys, mysterious lights sometimes appear deep within the ancient forests. Small lights, drifting gently above the ground, floating between the trees as if the air itself had come alive. Many believed these lights deceived travelers and led them into danger. But her grandfather would always smile when he heard such rumors. The will-o'-the-wisps never lose anyone, he would say softly. They simply reveal paths that people are too afraid to follow. For many years, Harthanor imagined those lights dancing in forests she had never seen. She dreamed that one day she might find them herself. But time passed. Responsibilities within the castle slowly grew, and little by little, the stories faded into distant memories. Then one quiet evening in Twinlight Nest, as the sun disappeared behind the rooftops and the river darkened beneath the docks, Harthanor found herself thinking about those stories again. She stood beside the water and watched the river flowing slowly toward the east. And for the first time in her life, she wondered what truly lay at the end of that journey That night a simple thought took shape in her mind. She would leave, she would follow the river east, and she would search for the will-o'-the-wisps. The next morning, before the village had fully awakened, Harthanor left Twinlight Nest. She crossed the silent docks, then the small bridge where the shops still slept. For a while she followed the river, letting the sound of the water guide her steps. Then she reached the road that stretched toward the east, toward lands she had never seen. At first, the journey felt almost peaceful. The hills were gentle, the forests bright with morning light, and the river followed her path like an old companion. But the farther Harthanor traveled, the larger the world became. Soon the roads grew rare, the forests deeper. Even the river itself eventually disappeared behind distant hills and valleys she had never seen on any map. Some nights were beautiful. She slept beneath the stars, listening to the quiet sounds of the wilderness. But other nights were harder. The wind whispered through the trees. Shadows moved where nothing should move. And sometimes doubt found its way into her thoughts. One evening, she met an old traveler sitting beside a small fire. He offered her a bowl of warm soup and asked where she had come from. When she spoke of Twinlight Nest and of the will-o'-the-wisps she was searching for, the old man remained silent for a moment. Then he smiled gently. Few people walk so far for a story, he said. Perhaps some stories are simply waiting for the right person to continue them. Encouraged by his words, Harthanor continued eastward. Days passed, and along the way she faced dangers she had never imagined. Wolves wandering through the forests, bears crossing the valleys, and distant Zebians she carefully avoided whenever she could. Then one day, she finally saw them. The giants. Enormous trees rising high above the forest, older and grander than any she had ever seen. They were just as magnificent as her grandfather had once described. But the shadows they cast were immense as well, turning the forest darker, quieter, and far more solemn. Yet now that she had come this far, turning back was no longer possible, she stepped deeper into the forest of giants. And suddenly, she noticed it, a small blue light floating gently above the ground. At first, it appeared only for a moment. Then it vanished, only to appear again a little farther away. Soon several small lights drifted quietly between the trees, the will-o'-the-wisps. They seemed neither threatening nor hurried. They moved slowly, as if following a path invisible to everyone else. Whenever Harthanor approached them, they drifted just out of reach. She watched them for a long moment, filled with wonder. Then one of the lights slowly moved. The wisp guided her deeper into the forest. Several times she lost sight of it among the shadows, until at last she arrived at a strange place hidden among roots and moss. Ancient ruins stood there, silent and forgotten. At the center rose a large stone slab covered in carvings. When Harthanor stepped closer, her heart slowed. For the name carved upon the stone was her grandfather's. And in that moment, she understood he too had once walked this road. The story he had told her had once been his own journey. Beneath his name were carved a few simple words. The world is vast, but fear builds walls higher than stone. Those who follow the will-o'-the-wisp simply learn to walk beyond them. The lights drifted gently around her, silent and peaceful. Then slowly they rose into the night air, as if their task had been completed. When Harthanor finally came to her senses, she smiled faintly. Something within her had changed forever. She was now free. And on certain misty nights, at the far edges of the Shire, travelers say they sometimes glimpse small lights dancing between the trees, and behind them, walking calmly toward the east, a young woman who once had never left Twinlight Nest.